You're here. At last. Now, once and for all.
Oh boy, many of you guessed what would be coming next. It is time to continue with the head of the Nohrian royal family. This divine lightning shall pierce the sky as we usher in the spotlight of the crown prince of Nor, Xander! Xander is the eldest son of King Garon and Queen Katarina of Nor, and the Nohrian royal family's only trueborn child, as all his other siblings were products of different relationships with Garon's many mistresses. In steep contrast to the strong figure he is known as in Fates, Xander was actually a weak and quiet child. Unlike his younger brother Leo, who was praised as a genius at a very young age, Xander had no particular talents, lacked physical strength, and was deathly afraid of speaking in front of others. He was also extremely intimidated by his father Garon, whom he viewed as the most intimidating person ever. At some point, however, Xander realized that he had to become strong if he was to be a worthy future king of Nor, and in order to wield the dark blade Siegfried, which was passed down to him by Garon, he knew he needed to relentlessly train himself and work harder than anyone else. Despite lacking talent, Xander became stronger through sheer force of will and ruthless training, working hard for hours and hours on end every single day, until eventually his body started growing stronger. He also forced himself to speak with his father often to overcome his social anxiety, as just being in the presence of Garon scared him to death. At some point, Xander hired 2 retainers into his service, though we never learn much about their names or origins. All we know is that they were incredibly skilled and very loyal. However, sometime prior to the events of Fates, a battle between Xander, his retainers, and some very strong Hoshidian soldiers took place, and while Xander himself survived this encounter, his 2 retainers did not. He felt extremely guilty about their deaths, blaming his own weakness, and this motivated Xander to train further and become even stronger, so that he would never experience such loss again. Xander would, after many years, eventually hire 2 new retainers into his service to replace the ones he had lost. He ended up hiring the mercenary Laslow and the cavalier Peri. Laslow was, as with many of the other Nohrian retainers, introduced to Xander by Garon. Initially, Xander did not like Laslow, believing him to be a joke with a goofy smile on his face, so he decided to challenge him to a duel to test his abilities. To his surprise, however, Laslow was a lot stronger than he had initially thought, being able to hold his own against Xander, and at one point during the fight, Xander actually felt like Laslow was toying with him. Eventually, he did manage to overpower his retainer, but he was so impressed by the fight that all doubts he had about the young mercenary were immediately dispelled. Peri, on the other hand, was actually handpicked by Xander himself. He noticed her at a jousting tournament in Windmire held for the Nohrian nobility. Despite not even winning the tournament, Xander decided to invite Peri back to the Nohrian palace, and shortly thereafter made the decision to hire her as his retainer. In their support conversation, Peri asks Xander why he chose her out of all the people, and at first Xander claims it was because he saw her raw, untapped potential during the tournaments. But in their final support conversation, he actually admits that the reason why he did it was because he found her attractive. There you have it, guys. Xander hired a psychopathic killer as his retainer because he thought she was hot. The future king of Nor, everyone. Sometime prior to the events of Fates, Xander's mother, Queen Katarina, passed away. With Garon growing increasingly distant from his children, Xander took over as sort of a father figure to the family. When Corin was adopted into the family, Xander took personal charge in overseeing his training, and sparred with him every day to make him stronger.
Nothing is more important than training. But I suppose one must also rest every now and then.
Xander is a man in his 20s. He has a strong, stern composure, and is seldom seen with his guard down. He has the trademark blonde hair and brown eyes of the Nohrian royal family, and he is clad in black platemail armor with golden ornaments. In his hand, he holds the Nohrian relic, the legendary blade Siegfried, which pulses with dark energy. Xander's personality is that of a strict and stern father figure. Knowing that he is the future of the kingdom, he seldom allows himself to relax or joke around. However, we do actually learn through some of his support conversations that he used to be a lot more easygoing in the past, and even used to joke and fool around a lot more when he was younger. We can't say for sure when this changed, but considering his siblings are quite used to his stern behavior, and even reacts with shock and awe when he occasionally tries to loosen up, he probably has been this way for most of his adult life, if not even longer. Xander has an extremely strong sense of duty, and puts his responsibilities as crown prince above everything, even himself and his own family. He is unshakable in his resolve and loyalty to his country, and would gladly give his life for its cause. In other words, Xander fits the epitome of the Camus archetype, a good, strong character bound in service to an evil master or kingdom who values loyalty above everything else, even his own future. As a unit, Xander is the strongest combatant among the Nohrian royals. He has insanely high base stats, respectable growth rates, great mobility, and his own personal weapon. And of course, being a royal, he can also activate dragon veins. Xander joins in Chapter 16 of Conquest and Chapter 17 of Revelations, and is an absolute physical powerhouse, with his hit points, strength, luck and defense being through the roof. He hits like a truck and can take a ton of abuse. During the first few chapters after he joins, most physical opponents won't even be able to dent him. Xander's personal weapon, Siegfried, is an extremely powerful sword that can deliver physical attacks at both 1 and 2 range, and unlike most other ranged swords, which incur penalties such as lowering speed or preventing follow-up attacks, Siegfried has no such restrictions. In terms of stats, to give a rough comparison, Siegfried has 1 more might and 5% less hit compared to a steel sword, but it also boosts Xander's critical avoid by 10 and gives him 4 defense, which puts his base defense up to 27, which is absolutely massive. It should be noted that Xander will get these bonuses simply from carrying Siegfried in his inventory, even if he is wielding other weapons, or even if he is reclassed to a class incapable of wielding swords, so keep it on him at all times. Being a paladin, Xander can wield lances as well, and this is certainly nice, as it allows him to wield utility weapons such as the Beast Killer, which can occasionally be very useful. In almost every single case, however, Siegfried is the only weapon you will ever need, as weapons don't break in Fates, meaning you can use the sword to your heart's content. Xander is not without his weak points, however. His resistance is incredibly low at 11, and his resistance growth of 25% doesn't really do him any favors either. While physical attacks will bounce off him, magic-wielding enemies can quickly bring him down. Luckily, he gets a skill at a later point, which offsets this weakness a little bit. Xander also has a pretty low base speed of 15, and while a 45% speed growth certainly isn't low by any means, it isn't amazingly high either. Xander will rarely get speed screwed to the point of being doubled himself, but he might very well find difficulties doubling, which can be quite problematic in the late game where enemies are getting a lot tougher to kill. Due to this, it is absolutely not a bad idea to save some speed wings to help him out if he's starting to slow down. Now, I know I've said in the past that the royals really don't need stat boosters, but I consider this an exception, as the difference between Xander not doubling and doubling is massive and absolutely worth some investments. Xander's personal skill, Chivalry, gives Xander a boost whenever he is attacking someone that hasn't taken any damage. It does not work if he himself is attacked, regardless of the enemy being at max health or not, nor does it work on dual strikes. Xander himself needs to be the one initiating the attack command for the skill to work. It should be noted that if Xander doubles, he will still gain the effects of Chivalry on his second attack, even if the first one did damage, as the effect of the skill applies to the entire round of combats. Xander also comes with Shelter, which essentially allows him to rescue a unit. If you're familiar with the rescue mechanic from the older Fire Emblem games, you should probably know how this works. Essentially, it's a reverse pair-up. Normally, when you select pair-up, the unit issuing the command becomes the backup units, but with Shelter, Xander can forcefully insert himself as the main unit protecting another. Since rescuing has not been a thing since Radiant Dawn, many tend to forget about it, and that's a shame as this skill can absolutely save you from restarting. Xander also comes with Elbow Room, which gives him extra damage whenever he's fighting in open terrain, which is pretty much all the time. Since Xander's defense is so high anyway, you might want to purposely avoid defensive terrain such as forests and forts, as the extra damage might be more useful than the defensive and avoidance. At level 5, Xander will pick up Defender, which is a pretty lackluster skill. It boosts all of his stats by 1 whenever he pairs up with someone. It's extra stats, which is always nice, but it is considered to be one of the weaker skills in Fates. At level 15, however, Xander will gain Aegis, which is an absolute godsend for him, as it gives him a skill percentage chance to halve the damage taken by bows, dragonstones, but most importantly, magic attacks. With Xander having respectable skill, Aegis will absolutely offset some of his difficulties in dealing with magic, though it is sadly not something you can rely upon to keep him alive, just a nice little boost of survivability whenever it does proc. Using a Heartsteel, Xander can reclass to a Great Knight, Wyvern Lord, or Malignites. While it may sound tempting to make him a flyer, either of the two later choices will deprive him of using Siegfried, which is obviously a very bad thing. Great Knight, on the other hand, is a very solid choice if you want to trade some of Xander's mobility for a bit of extra tankiness. Just remember that this will also make him weak to Armor Slayers and Hammers. If you're going to tinker around with other reclassing options, such as via Friendship or Partner Seals, make sure you reclass him into a class capable of wielding swords. Like with most of the other royals though, I find that his base class usually serves him just about fine. Once Xander obtains an S-rank support with any female units, he becomes the father of Siegbert, the Cavalier. Since Siegbert inherits his father's lackluster speed and resistance, it could be an idea to marry Xander to a wife with these strengths to offset this weakness, but at the end of the day, any unit that gives him better physical stats is an ideal choice. At the end of the day, Xander will most likely be one of the strongest units on your team in the chapter he joins, though he may not stay that way for very long. Regardless if you get unlucky or not, his strong bases and personal weapon will ensure he stays useful throughout the game. He is definitely not as absurdly broken as his Hoshidian counterpart Ryoma, but he still probably is one of the better units in Fates. Use him well and his Divine Lightning is sure to pierce the skies.
I hope you know that I'm always on your side. Nothing could ever change that.
Thank you for watching this character spotlight. If you want to watch more spotlights, you can click the link on the screen to visit my playlists, and there you will find all the previous spotlights I've done. If there is a specific character you'd like to see me cover in a future spotlight, let me know in the comment section below. If you found this particular spotlight entertaining, please give this video a like and a comment, it really helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to be updated whenever I release future videos, you can subscribe. As always, my name has been Manx, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.